What is going on, sir? We didn't think that 2020 could get any worse, but here we are once again. Uh, just going lower and lower every time. I don't know, man. Looks like we got some echo. Let us know in the chat where we get this fixed. We'll keep doing a mic check. Mic check. In the chat where we get this fixed. Test 1, 2. Let us know. We'll keep doing a mic. Alex D is muted and Alex P echoes. Test 1, 2. Let us know. Alex D is muted.
Is that? I think that's better. Yeah. No, I'm mostly just not talking. I can hear the YouTube signal. I think we're good now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Oh no. Are they saying they can't hear you now? Okay.
Check. Testing. Let us know. Thumbs up. Very faint. Better.
There we go.
All good now. All right. Man, it's always the audio. Cool. So just an area where we don't spend a lot of time in. Report canvas. I think all of us are always looking at some of the work that kind of like Chris Hamill and others are doing. You're like, man, that is incredible. How do they do it? I feel like from watching some of his YouTube live streams, if you have not yet, I would highly encourage people to go out and check those out. But it's very interesting the way that they approach problems, and it's not Power BI. The biggest takeaway I've had is like PowerPoint. Like it's the fifth or sixth member of the Power Platform, really, if you were to kind of look at the grand scheme of things.
It's I don't know what original Power tool. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the more you do in PowerPoint, I think, like from a design perspective, the better off you can be, because as we're gonna talk about, a lot of the tricks and hacks that you use on the visual canvas don't make it easy to maintain the report. Even stuff like complex layering, like anytime you need to resize stuff, not going to have a good time. So, yeah, I mean, Chris's idea of like you mostly do everything in PowerPoint, and then when you're done, you just put some charts on top. I think that's the way to go. But as we'll talk about, I don't know that we used to be big fans of Bookmarks in our team, and we did a major report with 50, 100 viewers and over 1,000 monthly views that we did, and all with a ton of bookmarks, and we've decided that was a horrible mistake, because maintaining it and updating it and keeping everything in sync has just like been more than we could manage.
I know I've seen that with kind of one of I want to say it's like a Microsoft 365 template app, where you can like see the various products. But if you click that open and you look at the bookmark pane, it is like complex, kind of if this then that bookmark conditions, where it's like if you do this thing in this way and you click this button in this specific order, then data or filters will flow through. And it was insane to make like one little update or edit, and to make sure that the bookmarks were still in sync. I think Sue left a great comment here. Just bookmarks can be messy. I don't know. I was excited about them a long time ago, and I not touched them in quite a while. Yeah. So coming back to them and seeing all these new like sync data, etc., I was like, whoa, like this is a whole new dimension that I need to start thinking about.
Yeah. So one thing that when we were watching Chris that he makes really aggressive use of is grouping, and I think that helps a lot because you don't have nearly as many things to select. But grouping and just the bookmarks in general, one of the things that you and I both really took away from is that while he had the whole design in his head at the start, and he knew which order to do things in order to not have a huge headache in terms of going back and tweaking them. But when you're maintaining a report, you don't know what changes you have to make in the future. So even if you're at that high level where you know exactly what changes to make or in what order to make your changes in, when it comes to maintenance, like that's going to be a real headache. And so I've really fallen in love with the filter pane. And like we don't use bookmarks for slicers at all anymore. It's just like, no, we'll put it in the filter pane. It's not as good as a slicer, but it's good. It has some more advanced capabilities, so we can at least tell our users that we did it because it's better rather than because it's easier. And it's so much easier.
I'd be curious from those in the chat, filter pane, are you championing it, or do users kind of still expect to see something on the canvas? They don't want to pop out the filter pane, just not as intuitive as maybe as they would like. Let us know. I'd be curious on that one.
Yeah. One thing we've learned from using the filter pane, though, is that you have to, you can't just, add a bunch of things to the filter pane because you have page level, report level, visual level. You don't know what your users are going to have selected. And so, I strongly recommend hiding a lot of the default created stuff. Hide the default, the filter pane items for all your visuals, except maybe if you have a couple visuals that you want them to do visual level filtering, and then tell them about that functionality for that visual.
There are a lot of great comments coming in. Filter pane for me has always been for the report author, not the end user. Kind of a great one here. Rarely use it, less intuitive.
Yeah,
so the standard slicer on the report canvas.
Yeah. So Susan mentions that with the filter pane, it can be tough to know what's on a visual. And here, I'm just going to switch to my desktop here. I used to think so and use the dump filters just like you did. And this little feature here is so much better than, this is one of the best features that the Power BI desktop team has shipped in a long time, in terms of intuitiveness and, you do have to tell your users about it, but I can't imagine ever making a dump filters visual now that we have this. It's so easy to have people do this, and it's very reliable. There's no chance of me to screw it up. Now, I do love the dump filters measure you get from Deck Studio, which, if nobody has seen that, let me just, yeah, sure, we'll connect here. Man, my camera keeps overheating. I don't know what the deal is. It was supposed to be... This camera was supposed to not do that. So if you don't know that in Deck Studio, I know we're supposed to talk about the visual canvas, but if you connect to a model, you can right-click on a table, and it will generate code that will, for every single column, it will show you all of the selected values up to a predefined limit, and then if it's more than that, tell you how many you have. It's super powerful. Now, one thing that we have learned is that with our model that's, I don't know, what in the model that I own, when we generate this, it's 5,000 lines of code. And when you update a measure that's that long, it can be slow. So I guess that's a use case for tabular editor. But what we use dump filters for, because we still use it, is usage tracking. This is something we haven't done on 2Alex, but right before we started 2Alex, I gave a presentation on this usage tracking system that we came up with on our team. And we have a little measure that has that generates a URL which points to a flow, and we tell Power BI it's an image. And so anytime it renders the report page, it runs the measure to fetch the image, and then Flow gets the URL and parses out all the details, including dump filters and who the user was and when they were looking at the report and what page they're on. And so we can track exactly who's using the report in a much more detailed way than usage metrics gives you. So, yeah, that is dump filters. So, Alex, are you getting something ready here? Should I switch over to your screen?
Yeah, let's go ahead and start looking at just, as we're talking about filters and slicers and things of that nature. It's this whole like parameter thing that I always kind of laugh at. People are always like, how do I add parameters? It's like, well, isn't that kind of what a slicer is? It really depends upon the number of things here within your data set.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll go down to current file query reduction. So when we're talking about just interactions, disabling cross-highlighting filtering by default for slicers or filters. So as we're kind of talking about the filter pane, but right here, slicers add an apply button to each slicer to apply changes when you're ready. The same can be done on the filter pane, but if we press OK, like, isn't this a parameter?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, we see these questions a lot internally and externally. Like, how do I bind a parameter in my query to a slicer? And I'm like, well, you must be using direct query. And the first answer is always, well, what's direct query? But then the next answer is, yes. How do I set up a parameter? And it's like, well, how would you expect that to behave differently from a slicer?
Yeah.
So.
But these are like the little things, but keep in mind, this is only good for one field. So let's expand this out now here a little bit into, maybe let's do it by state, province. And we'll drop this in, we'll do another, like, if I want to apply first, I have to click on one button. If I want to do another one, I have to click on another button. So it's like, how many ways do I have to slice and dice this data?
Yeah, well, again, the apply button on the filter pane goes across all of your changes at once.
Got it. So right down here in the far right, they can apply all of their filters that they need, and then from there they can just press the button once. So kind of from that usability perspective, we know if the filter pane is collapsed, it's not executing queries, so that's one benefit. So it's actually going to be more performant. And then from there, just like usability long term, the more we can get them over to the filter pane, hopefully it's going to be a lot easier. I've heard a lot of good kind of comments here lately. I don't know if you can actually expand it out in the Power BI service. Let me know if you can actually drag, kind of expand or collapse it, or if it's just static out there. I haven't tested in a while, but that would be one use case where I would say if they want parameters today, kind of on the visual layer, start incorporating it over here, and then really from the query reduction, so that's file options and settings, current file, and this is really like getting into the technical debt now. So all of these settings that can be done within the current file. So this one was query reduction, add an apply button. There's a whole another one here when report settings. So if it's going to be a setting that I'm going to apply in my current file, you can't do it globally for all of your files. So right here, filtering, allow your users to change, cross-report drill through. Did I turn it on? Did I allow them to do personalized visuals? If I set that up in the Power BI service and the current file settings, those don't sync back down to my local file, so I need to make sure that I'm in parity there. So it's just a lot of these little, it's almost like a checklist that you need to think about as you're building out reports.
Yeah, and these are things that you should tackle first because, for us, we're doing deployment with the XMLA endpoint. You can't change these settings with that XMLA endpoint at all. They're sort of baked in.
Yeah. So if you're to look at kind of the global settings for I always go back to at least the data load, auto date time, just canceling it for every new file that you do. Like, that's awesome. Personalized experience and report settings, not possible. So you literally have to remember every time to come out here. Or Power BI template file, where you have all these preset and you kind of use that as like your seed file. I think that's what a lot of people are calling it these days, but maybe it's got your branding and template already in there. You've already clicked all these options, so you want to make sure that are just persistent on every new model that you build, and just kind of using that blank PBIT.
Yeah. So let's go to, can you flip over to query reduction, and we can take a look at something else there. Because another thing we see a lot on our team is, well, it's actually not my team, but like one of my peers and their project, they have made really heavy use of edit interactions and changing the cross filtering. And so the place to start here when you're thinking about, hey, I need to do edit interactions, if you're going to do a lot of it, you may want to change this default, disable cross highlighting filtering by default. Because what we found is changing hundreds of edit interactions is extremely painful.
Yep.
And so you want to use this setting to make your life easier if it's going to make your life easier. So I'm going to switch over to my screen, and I'll just show a quick demonstration with this blank Power BI just of how. So I've got a chart here. Maybe I've got 3 charts across the top, right? And then I've got some cards that label these charts, right? So maybe I've got a card that floats in here, right? Okay, so now, and then maybe I've got like a little table that's along the bottom that describes these things. Okay, so now I'm going to come in here and hit edit interactions. And with no data, it's really no problem. But how do I edit interactions here? I have to change the design of my report, and then change the design back, and then, oh wait, I have to do that with every single visual. And so I think this is one of those things where you're like, oh, it's just really easy. I can flip this over, and it'll be no problem. As you get into it, it's going to get more and more complicated. So even if we put this at the bottom of the stack order, and it's like, okay, how do I edit this one? Because normally this would be transparent if I had data here. And you'd want it at the bottom because you wouldn't want users necessarily clicking on it. You'd want them, because you want it to be part of the chart. But that means now you have to come in and bring this up. Now you do your edit interactions and then bring it back to, like, there's so many things to do this. And this is one of those steps. I don't have a good way to demo this because I don't have a big sample data set where I can use data. The internal data set works well for modeling stuff because we don't actually have to look at the data, but here we would. Each of these changes can be one of those 15-second process times, and so it can take hours to do a full report page. So if you have to do edit interaction stuff, I would recommend strongly considering instead using disconnected tables and some DAX. Like, that also creates technical DAX, but like it's much more linear than the time consumption of sort of a multiplying problem around this stuff. Yeah. One thing you can do, and make use of more, is just starting by copying pages, and that'll preserve a bunch of these settings for you. You know, it's not everything, but we have we have preserved our settings there. So, yeah.
Kick it over to me.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at something. Let's dive into bookmarks. So I'm gonna ungroup here. Kind of, I don't know how we all lived kind of before grouping, but the great part here, kind of calling out selection pane, just in general, I'll just turn on everything. Why not? Sync slicers.
Alex,
there we go.
You should get an ultra wide monitor. That's what
I know.
That's what they're for. Everybody's always been wondering, like, why do we need bigger monitors? This is why we need bigger monitors.
So if you were to do all of your, actual development in Power BI, this is about what your report canvas should look like. I'm always like, oh, this does not feel that good. So let me collapse a few of these out, just kind of having a good laugh there. But selecting two different items, grouping them if you're not already. Let's do that. So just alternate click, right click here in my example. I'm going to do a group. And then somebody made a really good call out here. So I'm going to go to the View tab, selection pane. I have my group 1. Got my slicer. I've got this other table. If I click on the ellipsis here now, I see group. I see group. I see ungroup. I see merge.
Where's rename?
One property I don't see. Huh?
I was gonna say, where's rename?
Where is rename?
I don't know.
I'm gonna right click this then.
Yeah.
No rename. So to rename this, a nice, I think you always like to call them, just click paths.
Mm-hmm.
Double click, and you can rename.
I see.
So nowhere else does it tell you that you can rename this property. If you were to click it once, if you were to right click it, you would expect to see kind of the rename.
Yeah.
Not available. But if you double click, or if you were to press kind of F2 to get into edit mode, does that work? F2 does not work. Oh, wow.
I didn't even know that
better.
Worked elsewhere.
Yeah. So to rename in selection, double click. So customer group.
Yeah.
That's terrible. It's like, why didn't we tell anyone that they could be renaming and cleaning this stuff up?
Well, we're telling them, so that's what counts.
I know. So to collapse this, right, because we took up the entire screen left to right, I noticed that there is no actual collapse for selection. I can only close it,
mm-hmm.
and I can open it. Is that right?
I mean, if you're only going to leave one extra tab open, it should probably be the selection pane. So maybe you don't need to collapse this one.
If you click on selection,
oh man,
it collapses. So without the button, you would never know. But if you clicked on the title, it collapses the selection pane.
And all the other ones don't have a close button; they just have a collapse button. That's interesting.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah. So, what's the phrase here? Ideas.powerbi.com. or perhaps careers.microsoft.com.
But that's where, like, I'm just coming back and kind of getting the visual canvas here a little bit more lately, and it's like these little nuances are like, this is interesting. How are people kind of pulling this off? Obviously, tab order is something that is newer to me. I didn't have it kind of whenever I was doing a lot of report development. But jumping back over to bookmarks, kind of the same example here. You do have the rename option. I believe if you were to double click, you can rename it. So that's at least nice. It's these things that I didn't have when I kind of started with bookmarks that are like really interesting and I have to think about a lot. But the whole data filters being persistent, display, and then also current page. Yeah, or all visuals or selected visuals.
Yeah, these are really...
Like, this gets really complex.
They are. I wish, honestly, we had a little bit more options here. usually when I look at these and, we see all these nuances and path dependencies and complications, I often think that, there's just too many options. And, you have this problem with Excel where there's just like menus upon dialog boxes with dialog boxes of features, right? And you can have whole programs like Power Query or Power Pivot that are buried too deep inside of like pop-up boxes that you just don't even know. But here, this is a space where I wish we had a little more flexibility, because you can either have it do all the data or none of the data. And it'd be really nice to set a bookmark that changes like the filtering on a visual. And like you can sort of do that with selected visuals, but setting it up is really complicated and it doesn't quite have all of the flexibility that I'd like it to. So.
Well, then we'll throw that out to the chat. How complex are you getting with your bookmarks?
Yeah.
Are you trying to keep it pretty small, or do you just have a massive pane kind of scrolling top to bottom? You have certain bookmarks that do certain things in combination. Maybe it's a display and a selected visual, or maybe it's data, all visuals. I don't know. Let us know. I'd be curious.
Yeah.
Kind of hear your thoughts.
Yeah.
But I just can't believe how complex that this is getting from the visual layer, though, with bookmarks.
Totally. So the other thing that, let's see, Donald hasn't done much with bookmarks. Sahil basically just has bookmarks for pages.
Yep.
Yeah, so the types of things that we did in ours. So at one point we had like a bunch of slicers that we were showing and hiding, and doing like pop-ups, where you'd have like a slicer panel that came out, and that was sort of cool. The other thing that we did for a while, that I thought was a really good use of bookmarks, and I don't think this creates much technical debt at all. Let me just turn off edit interactions. Is we would take the report canvas and I just insert a simple transparency effect. So like, if we
Are you kicking over your screen?
Oh yeah. Let me switch over to my screen. So I take our report canvas and I create just a simple transparency effect. So crank way up the transparency, yeah, something like that, and turn this off so there's no border. And then we'd add,
oh, Chris Hamill did this.
Yeah, then we'd add
right?
text boxes around, and we'd say like, this visual shows X, the metric is defined as, and so we'd write like a whole little like descriptor of what was going on, and we put all of these sort of narrative tools, and then we take and see, and then this is where doing these things gets tricky. We take and select these, we would group them, and then add a bookmark, add another bookmark, and then we'd have a button.
Alex, don't forget you can press the bookmark to collapse it, since you don't actually see the option.
Yeah.
It's here to click the text.
Oh yeah.
Just making that a call out.
Yeah. So let's see if so then you could toggle between having descriptions and having the visuals easy to see. And I think this is one use that's really easy to do. In fact, one of our reports, I actually took like a whole PowerPoint presentation and put it took a screenshot of it and put it in this sort of view. Those types of things where you have a bookmark just triggering a single action, especially if it's like an object and doesn't affect the data at all, that can be really easy to maintain. You do have to remember to do data, but I think that can be a good use. We have other folks. Let me just hide my group here. We have other folks that are like, we'll have like a central visual and then some stuff around it, and then we'll take and put each of, so like we'll have one bookmark that shows this one, and another bookmark that shows this one, and another bookmark that shows this one, and so you can like sort of swap out the center without changing report pages. I think you're better off just creating report pages. Yeah.
Ooh.
So
I'd be curious on everyone else's thoughts, because I remember at least kind of a long time ago when.
Mm-hmm. Alex, you still there? I think we. Oh. I got Teams had a hiccup, so you said.
I saw that.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully I'm still here, but kind of back in the day where we used to use like icons to show different charts. It'd probably be easier just to do a different report page if you really wanted to. I'd be curious, are a lot of people using personalized visual experience for end users now? Let me know, because I've actually been demoing that a little bit more lately, and people are really kind of latching on to that story. Obviously, it comes back to like, can I train my end users to go to the ellipsis in the top right and figure this thing out for themselves? Who's going to lead that effort? But I'd be curious if anyone's been successful kind of getting that rolled out.
Yeah, we have some reports where it would be super ideal for, and I've encouraged the owners of those reports to use it. And honestly, just like the sheer number of boxes they have to tick to turn it on, like you have to do it in like 3-4 different places, has been a bit of a barrier. They're like, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, but like
it comes back to training.
I'll have to think about it, and then they forget how to do it while they're thinking about which visuals they want to do. But I think it's going to save us a whole bunch of time here. So, yeah.
No, it sounds like people kind of love the idea, are starting to kind of use it, maybe within some of the user discussions. And maybe this all comes back to, I don't know if we're getting a little echo there, but if you want to switch over to my screen here, Alex.
Yeah.
Cool. Just selecting the single view now here, just kind of the bar. The format, I know there's a good Twitter discussion. We shouldn't call it format painter because it's not. It's format. But it's all of these options. And really like my friend Sandeep the other day, he had commented, he was like, why does this get so much real estate, but I have to scroll for all of these? Like, why doesn't this just kind of get hidden as I'm kind of dealing with all of this? I would love to see this as more of the pop-out style within Excel. I rarely use kind of this section. I'm always just typing, you know, what basic word do I need? So if it's like text size, there we go.
Yeah.
But visual header, like there is a sea of options down here now.
Yeah.
Information icons, warning icons, drill on, drill up, down, focus, blah, blah, blah. Visual header, tooltip icons. I don't know. It feels a little bit unruly, but you really need to think about what does this one particular visual need to show. If you've ever kind of used Reed Haven's methodology, he says, I come down here and I turn everything off first. So he just goes top to bottom, turning everything off, and he only adds it in if it actually has a requirement that's necessary.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Which I think brings us back to another point that we brought up early, which is with report design, a lot of these, like, doing those settings on one visual is easy. Doing them on 100 is going to take you a couple hours. And so there's like a whole checklist of things that you need to do before you start actually creating your visuals, and like decisions that you need to make. And so maybe that's a good piece of content that we should do, is like, what is that checklist? Because, you know, there's so many things. I feel like your life is just so much easier if you have the answer to them before you start just slinging lots of visuals around.
Thinking about Chris and Miguel's Reddit AMA, I'd asked the question, you know, how much of the model are you willing to sacrifice to make the visual canvas work? And they go, it's all about the end user requirements. So they're more than happy to sacrifice the model. And I'm always like, oh gosh. Wait, no, the star schema isn't going to meet every need.
Yeah, well, from my perspective, it's sort of the opposite, which is I produce a model that's supposed to be used by 5-10 different analyst teams. I can't sacrifice the usability and understandability of the model for one report, because that makes everybody else's life more difficult. So some things we try and do generalized implementations of, like a like a measure switcher. But some things it's like, sorry, you just can't get a disconnected table that duplicates all the usernames, because that's going to be too confusing for everybody.
Theo had a great comment here. We needed an external tool to make it easier to modify stuff at the visual level. Desktop is just too slow and clunky.
Yeah.
Could you imagine just like a bulk editor here on the report layer to set all of these properties?
Yeah, and I think like the Power BI helper that I think Radicad did starts trying to go that direction. They can't do it because the report data is one of the things that the metadata is not well defined. But I think that my understanding is they're pretty committed to getting to where PBIXs can do diffs and source control, and they're going to have to solve that problem. And so certainly at some point in the journey to that feature, we'll get bulk editing of visual metadata. But when it will be, I don't know. I imagine that's a lower priority item for getting the metadata defined on, but it may be a lot easier than Power Query, which I know has been a bit of a challenge. So
I don't know. There's just a lot going on now, and especially the mobile layout, with that having changed and more flexibility over here too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Like, if you're going to do a mobile layout, you can't forget about it. You gotta keep it updated. And I know that's kept us from doing mobile layouts before. It's like, yeah, I've got one or two users. Now they're super important users, but one or two users that would love to look at their reports on their phones while they're traveling or when they were traveling. But now I have to maintain that. And since my regular users aren't going to tell me when there's problems, it could go a long time until finally one day a VP comes to me and says, why is my mobile layout screwed up? And you're like, I haven't looked at that in months.
Well, that's where I was learning, like, the whole PowerPoint experience. You can only do it with visual kind of canvas objects. So like a background, I can't set.
Yeah.
I need to have a background image hidden somewhere on my report canvas that I can then pin over here and do some type of layer ordering with the order. And it's just like,
yeah,
it's fun. I mean, I'll give, credit, but I don't want to use Power BI to have fun. I want to be productive.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much you can do, and I really enjoy designing reports, but you don't get a lot of leverage doing that. Like you're only solving one problem at a time. So,
yeah. So a couple questions here. Custom Viz, I think it's called Timeline Storyteller, something that looks so good. Where's Quake? Oh, I'd be curious what the Timeline Storyteller. Oh, I think I remember that.
I think I remember this too. It's something that like increments your filter state over time. Like scrolls through a parameter or something. Yeah, I mean, you can do a ton of stuff with that. I don't know if you can wire bookmarks to it, but you could certainly have some pretty radical changes to your stuff, especially as they have more conditional formatting options. But I haven't played with it because so you have to think about the dimensionality of your reports. Most data, you pretty much have time and some, like, you need to have something that changes over time where there's sufficient other dimensionality that the data is understandable. And a lot of times, without time, all the times shown to you at once, it's really hard for the user to internalize what the story is. So it can make for a really good eye-catching display where someone who's not familiar with a subject area can be brought in and engaged by it. But in most business reporting, your users are already familiar with the subject area, and precision and clarity is more important than accessibility, because you have the time to sit down and think through it or explain it to them. I suspect that's not a universally held opinion, but in my mind, like, not having things that are misleading and not separating context from each other is more important than like something that's really slick. So, yeah, Alex, should I switch over to your screen here?
Yeah, go ahead. Just having a little bit of fun here. Kind of. Otherwise, we'll do a blank. See how good I do here, just on my first pass.
Yeah, you wanna hit that zoom in?
Yeah,
So we can see how bad your code is. Oh man, that's right. You can do control scroll in the DAX window.
So thinking about like headers now, total unit price by. Oh. No, I can do it by all. Let's do that instead. I'll just steal. This is like whenever people are like hell-bent on customizing everything.
Mm-hmm.
Unit price by. There we go. All total unit prices. Because I always come back to this kind of statement, just nothing is free in Power BI, especially when it comes to just compute and resources. So customization kind of at the visual layer. Let's do total unit price by customer name. Let's do header.
I always forget to use search.
Really?
Yeah. It's a great feature. I just forget about it. Yeah, Mike is right. Alex's header would be better if he'd use concatenate X, because it's going to fall over if he's just filtered to like 2 or 3 categories.
There you go.
But you know, he's not a pro at this visual canvas thing, so we'll cut him some slack.
So field first customer. Now we want to do it based on a measure. Why do I not have a title? Title text, FX.
You might just be able to select the measure in there, even though.
There it goes.
Yeah.
Oh, of course it doesn't say. So all unit price. There we go. Yep. So unit price for customer versus just having it for all. Like, cost you a query. So looking now at our kind of our view, performance analyzer, start recording, and then let's just there we go. Like all these little things add up.
Oh yeah, so each of those is a separate query because it can't fold those into a single query.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So another area that I feel like we often run into obstacles on, and this is another area where you sort of need to think about in advance.
Well, like, what value do I get out of this title header versus just a static one?
Yeah.
Is it a nice to have or is it a need to have?
Having one dynamic title for the page somewhere on the page that gives you like a quick orientation to what the page is about, I think that makes total sense. Doing dynamic header on every chart, I don't think is the right choice. I know when I was studying chemistry in college, it was like every chart needs a title and labels and a legend and grid lines. Like, it was very prescriptive. Like, you needed all the chart elements. But I think it's better just to have a title on the page and then label your axes rather than trying to do some sort of dynamic title on every chart. Yeah, so I think Fio's doing a really good transition into our views on color themes and just themes in general. So I design reports for consumption by Microsoft employees inside of Microsoft, and so the default colors are very on brand, so we rarely have to fiddle with them. And so, like, if you have like a really good color sense and come up with like a good color palette, I think that's fantastic. And like, maybe you should make some JSONs for colors. And I used to do that for a while. Bing had a separate color language from the rest of Microsoft, but over the last 5 years, we've sort of consolidated all of our brand imagery across products. So, even we have much less of that, and even the products that do have sort of unique colors, like even Power BI Yellow, is part of the Microsoft color space, and you don't have to like do anything special to add it to your palette. But I think themes in JSON in general are super important, and another one of these things that like you absolutely should create in advance, because getting consistent font and label sizes is really important. I mean, one of the things we've been seeing with Alex creating these charts is even with Zoomit, his labels are too small, and if you do this on a visual by visual basis, not only will you spend a long time setting it up, but you're probably not going to be consistent unless you like have memorized some font sizes that you like to use. And
like,
so
ours is the Go UI for Microsoft. That is our brand font. So out of curiosity, for those in the chat, is your organization's font displayed here within Power BI, or did you make an executive choice of which one you were going to use?
Yeah.
Power BI.tips does have a great theme generators, though.
It
does. That they've already pre-built.
It does. This UI that's built in is also really good. I haven't actually used it yet because...
Yes. Greg had the best question here, and I'm waiting for this. So do you fellas see the art of building high-gloss, polished end-user dashboard / report artifacts, a completely different area of professional focus over time versus kind of the DAX, the DAX layer?
So it's not a different area of professional focus, but both of our jobs, it depends how big your organization is, right? So I work for a multi-billion-dollar business line of Microsoft, and we have a bunch of analysts, and then separately I have a team where all we do is try and make data available to them. And we, as much as possible, try not to get them to have us build their visuals for them, because then we have to support them and they don't understand how they work or what to do to maintain them in the future. And so we, as a rule, never, ever try to make reports unless they're like metadata reports about our data. But there are other teams that, they have the data handed to them and they try and make reports, and we do as much as possible to make it so they don't have to write DAX. And then we have other teams in our organization that create reporting for like the head of the org, and they have their own premium capacity, and they, sort of talking earlier, have models that they build with all the functionality that they do horrible things to their model to get the visuals to work right. And that's the right thing. And so they're sort of like full cycle, like we do everything to make sure that we get the perfect report. And on the other hand, we have a bunch of analysts where the goal is to make them productive, not to create something that's really powerful. So I think it really depends on the organization. And then, for Powers, when you're trying to sell Power BI, like it's almost never the visual design that's like going to be the deal breaker, right? It's always about like, how do I make the data accessible enough, right?
Yeah. There's still kind of like a perceived vision that Power BI is like a visualization tool, but more of an analytics platform whenever you actually dive into it. Great comments here, at least within the chat, just everyone firing off. They see it as two different layers. I know it's like some people are just thinking, oh, I'm going to go learn everything that there is to know about Power BI. I am not that person. I'll be 100% honest. Like, I pick a certain area of the program that I want to focus on. So it was like Power Query. I'm going to get really confident in that, and then I'll move into DAX. All right, I feel better in DAX, and I'm going to move on to the visual layer. I see the people that are trying to juggle everything all at once. They missed a lot of kind of the fundamentals of how do I shape my data. All right, now how do I analyze my data?
Yeah, I guess I disagree a little bit in that, like, if you want to get the most out of the visual canvas, you need to know when and how to create bespoke modeling elements. And if you want to build a really great tabular model that's really useful to all of your users, where they feel like they can actually use Live Connect and not just do their own import models, you have to know what tricks they're going to use and implement things that aren't technically required of the model, but make their lives easier. So I talked before about like doing a measure switcher as a calculation group, or maybe you do want to create some disconnected tables. If you don't know what the visual folks are trying to do, you're never going to think that those features make sense.
Yeah, and this is where I think we're split here. Theo says Dupler is 100% correct. Laura is saying UI UX is a skill I don't have, so I recruit help when I need it. Yeah. That's how I do.
Design sensibility and like Photoshop is definitely a different skill area.
Yep.
Yeah.
I guess I deliver the model to a point where it's like, hey, this is ready for consumption, and if you now want to start deviating from kind of the recommended practices, it's up to you.
So, Micah, for keeping the clutter down in the semantic model, what I like to do is hide tables, and then when users tell me, oh, I need to solve this problem, to like, oh, you know what, if you just do unhide all and you scroll down, you'll find that the table you need. It's not there because it's confusing, but now that you want to do this, I will tell you about it. It's sort of like perspectives, but I think I haven't really dove into perspectives, and like you don't have to switch perspectives to make it work. You just have to like dig a little deeper. I am super excited for composite models. I think they're really going to be great when they come. Yeah.
And I know that'll be a topic that we really want to hit home on. It's just leveraging composite models.
We're going to do multiple shows about it because I am sure that one, there'll be lots of complicated performance stuff to talk about, and just like with some of these other big enterprise features, what comes out in preview on day one is certainly not going to cover all of the use cases, and so you know, like what did we see with aggregations? Row level security wasn't supported with aggregations for a long time. That wouldn't surprise me at all with other features, and that could be a real heartbreaker until it's supported. And so we might have to do multiple rounds of composite model like discussion.
So I'm kind of demoing here the tooltip aspect. So it's like built the model, it's now out to the users. This is where I usually say goodbye. But somebody building something out for the business, and they're building kind of this training layer where they've recorded just a GIF format, visual header, point and click. To pull this off, though, you need to have the disconnected table that shows which tooltip is going to point to. You need to have the storage set for where the files are going to be actually kept, so that it's not just pointing to someone's desktop or like a SharePoint library that no one has access to. It's like these little things. If you've not come out to this report in the past, I would highly recommend doing so and just like ripping it apart. Like this navigation menu is beautiful. The way that it's like tabbed out to execute on a lot of these things though. So which table is this? Details.
And Alex, is this report downloadable from a Power BI portal, or is it something that we distribute through sales?
No, this is downloaded from a Power BI blog, the sales and return sample. And Feo, that is a GIF. So like right here, as a DAX and an M guy, I don't know that I'm going to go out and build a table with the correct tab orders, and then the sort orders and everything else. I don't know that for my organization that is the most effective use of my time. So if I had a UX, UI person on staff that could, maybe I built the model to the 80%, 90% layer, and they're going to take it kind of that 10% that's going to, create a beautiful report and close the last gap. Honestly, I don't see that as an effective use of my time or skills. If somebody else can go out there, has a method for doing all these things, I would much rather trust them.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're going to be recording videos, building these disconnected tables, setting tooltips. You can just get wild here. Disconnect tables with switch measures. Yep. Yeah. So let me get that link here for the group. I'll drop that in the blog. But once again, that's just my personal opinion. You could take it on yourself and do the full thing.
One of the things that we've been doing more and more in lieu of disconnected tables is calculation groups. I haven't done rigorous testing on this, but Phil Seamark made a comment to me that a lot of times a calculation group is faster than using Switch. And calculation groups are more powerful. And so we really like doing, like if you want to do a measure switcher or any sort of other sort of dynamic disconnected thing. Yeah, calculation groups are the way to go.
No, I mean, there's some great comments here.
Yeah.
So I did drop in the sales and return sample in the chat, just asking a question about embedding in something like Word Online. Nothing natively. There are some kind of third-party tools that allow you to kind of do the external embedding experience. Maybe it's Power BI Robots might be one of them, or I'll have to get the official one for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean there's a lot to take on.
Yeah, there is quite a bit. So the other thing, I mean, obviously we talk a lot about the model side and not as much about, even though today we've talked a lot about the report canvas, but we keep straying off of the report canvas into these other topics. And I think there's two main reasons. Is one, like, it is downstream of everything, and so small mistakes upstream can have a big impact on your report canvas experience. And two, I think this is more unfortunate and why you see folks getting frustrated that the visual canvas doesn't get enough love is the report canvas, like so many of our users, like when they build reports, they just want to like sling out the report in like 3 hours and move on to the next project. And they're not spending days and days or months slaving over the design of a particular thing and trying to optimize it. And then finally, the report the back end is where all the money is. In terms of what does our organization spend money on to empower analysts, it's making sure that they get the right data. And when I did report design, the amount I was empowered to spend to make things easier for me was basically zero. And now that I'm doing back end, like thousands, tens of $1,000s a month, no problem. Just like, what do you need? Oh, you want to do a petabyte of data? Okay, no problem. Just swipe that credit card. So, yeah.
You were having a bit of fun here in the chat. Power BI versus Tableau, which is better from a visual layer?
Yeah, so I mean, if you wanted to create the one perfect visual, you would absolutely use Tableau. I wasn't a huge fan of the process of composing from one or three visuals into a report page. Power BI is not perfect. We spent a lot of time today talking about how it's not perfect, but like Tableau's paradigm, I thought was made it difficult to do layering and stuff. Like, again, how fancy do you need to get? Like, there's definitely some functionality in terms of labeling and that we could need to get better on. But a lot of the stuff, it's like, well, simple, clear, uncluttered. Like, there's not a huge difference in capabilities for bar charts. And, like, really all I'm trying to do is make some bar charts.
95% of business decision makers care about a bar or a line.
Yeah.
Everything else is just something fancy.
Yeah.
They all look the same. In terms of flexibility, even comparison with Excel just beats it night and day.
Excel's really flexible because you can type in the numbers. The great thing about Power BI is also its biggest drawback, which is that you can't just type in what you want. You have to build up from your source data. And on the one hand, that means that it's so much more work. And on the other hand, it means that nobody's accidentally or not so accidentally replacing your beautifully sourced data with numbers they just made up. Yeah. And so, doing cube values in Excel is definitely where you get the most flexibility, probably even more than Tableau. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff, is it Alberto Cairo that does the like crazy Excel design? Like, you can do so much more there, but there's fewer tools to help you get it done. Like, writing cube formula is extremely complex and there's no auto completion on typing out long object names and references. And, doing all of that crazy design, like, you're going to be writing Visual Basic, you're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. And so, like, yes, like, you can build better tools with like, if you go to a more first principles tool, so whether it's Excel or just like D3.js and Python, like, you can build better stuff, but like, your time to insight is going to be so much longer because you're building stuff from scratch. And my experience is that in business use cases, it's so much more important to build a report in an hour than it is to create the 538 prediction page with all the like amazing outlines that fill in, and like all that's like, you know, just straight up coded. But that's because they've got like a team of 10 that work on it year round for a single page, and most of us don't have that luxury. And I think
I'm showing
values start to get there. Yeah.
and then at least on the customization, kind of talking about, you know, kind of D3 Charticulator. If you want to come out and torture yourself for a weekend, this thing is a beast. It is. I think I spent like 3 hours trying to build a bar chart one time, but anything you want to do, customize, drag and drop it on the canvas, and come out here and figure it out. Power BI Tips has a great series. I know Leela from Radicad, they've also got an awesome series that's kind of going around right now. So if custom visuals is a requirement or something that you need to kind of fulfill for your end users, and you don't want to write code, come out here, kind of have at it. I think it's pretty great. Awesome. I think we're at time, or we're a little over, Alex.
Yeah, I was worried we weren't going to make it to time today, and so it's been a great discussion. Thanks to everybody that stayed and hung out. And in 2 weeks, we're going to be talking about analysis services versus premium. We're super excited for this topic. It's
everyone go to Ignite next week.
Yeah, you should definitely listen to Ignite if you're interested in analysis services versus premium. And it's a question we get all the time. I get it internally, constantly. I mean, just last week, I had folks on my team being like, hey, should we think about moving to analysis services? And I was like, oh, boy, how much time you got? And both in terms of let's talk about the trade-offs and in terms of do you know how much work you're signing up for? Because they've built all this Power BI stuff and you can't just migrate it over. For Ignite, no, I haven't looked at the schedule.
Anything with the Rune or Justina is going to be worth your time.
I would guess that, well, you should watch the keynote. And then specific sessions, I haven't looked at the schedule, but, you know, it's not a Power BI conference, so I would probably watch all the Power BI sessions.
Yeah, just type in Power BI as your keyword.
Yeah, there's only going to be so many of them. Yeah. So, yeah, in 2 weeks, after I get back from my next vacation, which will be fantastic, we're going to go hiking again. But this time we have a hotel room in between hikes instead of camping out on the hike. And yeah, we'll talk about premium versus analysis services, and it'll be great.
Awesome. Well, and let's get out of here for today. Just thanking everyone again here in the chat, but awesome questions coming in. I'm of the mindset, just hire a UX and UI person and teach them kind of dashboarding today, and that should hopefully be good enough. If you're really looking for kind of that pretty, you know, PowerPoint for data-like experience, but if it's more kind of simple storytelling that you're doing and you're just wearing all the hats, you know, don't overwhelm yourself. Just kind of take it one thing at a time.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, thanks everyone, and see you next time.